To become immune to psychological manipulation, one must understand how it works. I am not explaining this to give tips on how to manipulate the masses, but to build immunity against it. One does not defeat shell players with witch hunts, but with education about how the scam works. Then the problem will solve itself, because the shell players will no longer find any victims and will only be locked away. I use terms like the dead and necromancers here, which sounds more like fantasy and fiction. Of course, it is not literally about the dead that are summoned, but they are allegories that refer to real processes. Necromancy is about splitting the metaphysical unity into two dual opposing poles. This dual split is fractal and takes place on a large scale as well as on a small scale. For example, in the personality profile of the necromancer. He serves the two outer elements. He is naive about his own assumptions of reality, believing that if he wants something, it will automatically become his right, that he can take it. He is subordinate to a primitive drive for power and allows it to determine his actions. He is naive about himself and narcissistically arrogant about the life around him. A necromancer is therefore nothing more than an intelligent psychopath with occult knowledge. Due to his low emotional intelligence, he has a perceptual disorder and is therefore unable to empathize with the people around him. As a result, he tends towards the psychopathic narcissistic fallacy that the reality around him is designed to be constructed and manipulated by himself. He is unable to recognize the contradiction that the reality created him can never function according to this principle. His own organic existence disproves his false belief that reality and all the individuals around him exist for the purpose of being constructed by him. His worldview is turned upside down. He believes he would be the law and declares his interests to be the objective value that is more important than the interests and well-being of other individuals. A necromancer is therefore nothing mystical and has no contact with supernatural demons, but is simply an intelligent person with occult knowledge and a mental disability, as well as some kind of metaphysical schizophrenic perceptual disorder, in which he has a completely inverted understanding of nature and believes that he himself would be the lawmaker of reality. For a necromancer, it is important that no one understands the archetypal patterns and the psychology of a psychopath. His victims must live under the illusion that no one would be so wicked and manipulative to play on their emotions like on a piano. As the Ash experiment shows, many people will bend to the group even if the answers are obvious. Imagine how it is with ideologies. There it is often a matter of complex intellectual concepts, and sometimes it is simply a matter of taste or individual priorities. A balanced mind of a priest, which is in harmony with the nature of reality, lies in the two inner elements of helpfulness, humility and avoidance of violence, of the sacred feminine element, and self-defense, self-government and the will to self of the sacred masculine element. However, a priest can also move into the external element of self-sacrifice. This is then not a service to man-made law or totalitarian ideologies, but a service to the natural order and for the protection of the evolution of life. The self-sacrifice of the path of the right hand becomes superfluous as soon as the species becomes aware of the nature of reality and the mind, and no longer allows itself to be manipulated into totalitarianism by the mind control strategies of the path of the left hand and the necromancers. The dual antipole of the necromancer are the dead, which are simply people who are manipulated into ignorant and naive worldviews. They are not aware of the archetypal patterns, which makes it very easy to program a dual and binary worldview. They live in a black box. Black box means a complex system or device whose internal workings are hidden or not readily understood. The dead are held away from the understanding of the nature of mind and morality. The mind is a black box. They do not understand the archetypal dialectic for the unification of all things, and this allows the necromancer to divide them with a dialectic that stands inverted to nature's principles. It is in the nature of life that it happens on its own. Likewise, human life decides for itself, and the ability to decide ends where others make their own decisions. The necromancer's goal is to remove people from the process of self-determination and make them act in the necromancer's interests without them even realizing it. It's about creating a metaphysical split between the necromancer and the summoned dead. As I said, it is not really about the dead, but about a group of individuals that the necromancer wants to manipulate so that they no longer act according to their own will, but in the will of the necromancer. To do this, they need a dual mind that becomes ignorant to a neutral perspective and naive to the necromancer's comments. A necromancer wants totalitarian control over the decisions of individuals. At best, over all decisions and processes of the entire world. That would be the ultimate Antichrist. Through his comments, he controls all nations and every human being is at his service. Here, we could take German fascism as an example, which had a total claim to rule, used mass psychology and propaganda to move whole crowds of people to commit barbaric acts, and there was also an interest in occult practices and philosophies. To the dead, one speaks through a medium. So people are programmed through the media, because it allows the necromancer to reach the masses. It is also helpful to exploit the idol worship and buy celebrities to promote political ideologies. Since many people take celebrities as role models and then imitate them, they can easily be instrumentalized to summon the dead. Every necromancy is essentially about getting the manipulated group to abandon their will to self. This moves them into the outer left element and makes them programmable, allowing the necromancer the will to rule. The elements contain worldviews that can avoid or generate power. The outer left element, which the manipulated persons are supposed to serve, is not only the will to obey, but also a worldview that justifies it. There are different ways to manipulate people in this element. For example, by manipulating the left vision from the idea of equal rights into a Marxist extreme that measures immorality by unequal values and outcomes. Likewise, we find there the New Age ideologies that abandon their self and see only the wholeness of things, or religious one-eyed monotheists who do not understand the nature of monotheism. If one goes into the meta view where things become a unity, it can quickly feel like enlightenment, which it is not if only the wholeness is viewed one-sidedly. The meta view is missing, which sees the large and the small as a whole and in which one is able to see from all of these perspectives. Seeing the great orderate unity does not make one a many-eyed one if one loses sight of the chaos in the small. For the necromancer, all of these one-eyed worldviews can be used to establish his global monopoly of power. Whether Marxists who want to bring everything under a global state, or New Age ideologies who deny the ego, or even one-eyed monotheists who believe that everything must be under a centralized theocracy that enforces their religion globally, they are all in the one-eyed service of the Antichrist, as they want to invert natural laws that are universally valid in order to bring the world under a central monopoly of power. The manipulated people are cynically called the dead because they allow themselves to be blindly driven by the necromancer into a global control system. To him, they appear like will-less vessels that can be controlled and programmed. This happens partly by itself. If other people talk to the dead for too long, they eat their brains and they get also carried away by their dual worldview, to then, as in The Walking Dead, just mindlessly run along with the herd with no goal of their own. Due to their narcissistic self-image, necromancers have a false understanding of reality as the so-called dead. So in necromancy, both sides are mentally blinded and have a worldview beyond natural common sense. Now let's take a look at the group that needs to be controlled. It is also split into two parts, into cult and anti-cult. They are trained to hate each other as much as possible and see each other as the root of all problems. A necromancer doesn't care about political values or which side dominates. It is only about manipulating them into ideological extremes because this makes them open to totalitarian control and violence. These two groups are manipulated into two opposite worldviews, both of which are half true and half false. This works by telling people that archetypal concepts such as egoism and altruism, authoritarian and anti-authoritarian, freedom and equality, or private and public are dual concepts of good and evil. It is important to understand how emotional programming works. It is actually quite simple, and we find it in advertising. They show situations and music that triggers a certain emotion. Afterwards, the product or brand name is shown. If this is done often enough, this emotion is linked to the brand name, and every time this logo or product is seen, this emotion is triggered again. For example, showing a happy family enjoying good times together while eating yogurt. At the same time, it is told how great it is when the family has their yogurt time. If one sees this often enough, one eventually associates this yogurt with the warm and secure feeling of being in a happy family. Another example is a woman who walks around confidently and is adored by good-looking men because she has a stable and well-fitting hairstyle due to her hairspray. And then there's cool music playing, singing about how unstoppable one is. If this is seen often enough, some people will feel unstoppable when they walk around with a well-styled hairstyle because of the hairspray. Basically, it works in a similar way to indoctrinating dogs with a clicker. Every time the dog is given a snack, the person clicks. If this is done often enough, the clicking sound is enough to trigger the dog's positive emotion. This creates a connection between an emotion and something else that actually has nothing to do with each other. The click sound is not a snack at all. Hairspray is not necessary for more self-confidence, and one does not become a perfect family by eating a brand name yogurt together. It's about bringing something together that actually has nothing to do with each other. Advertising is usually about generating positive emotions and creating a bond with a product or brand. That would not make sense otherwise. Imagine watching a video with shrill and far too loud noises that are almost unbearable, and seeing legs torn off by explosions, people screaming in pain and being brutally tortured. Then rotting animals with maggots crawling out of the eyes. Then comes a brand logo. If someone would see this product when shopping, they would probably avoid it and get a bad feeling just by looking at it. This is exactly how political propaganda and mind control work. This is exactly how the controlled oppositions are constructed and controlled. One divides the world of perception and political ideas into two binary categories. Always showing people all the extreme and inhuman ideas of one side and the good ideas of the other side. At some point, people then associate positive emotions with one wing and negative emotions with the other. Since everything has two sides and both wings can be divided into a pro-life and an anti-life element, two oppositions can be created that evaluate these two categories inverted to each other. Everyone is blind to the anti-life element of their own side. It is then no longer perceived. The key aspect of this metaphysics is mathematics and its relationship to the abstract categories of order and chaos. In the same way mathematics can be misunderstood, one can also misunderstand the nature of morality and the nature of humankind. The essences of mathematics are the laws and the values. Laws are fixed and everywhere the same, while values are variable and volatile. This can also be inverted, by transferring the equality and connectedness of the law to values, or the volatility of values to the idea of laws. The law is the realm where we find the science on morality and universal rights, and in the values is the realm of physical manifestations and the science on the material. Psychological manipulation works best by using archetypes. As archetypes are universal and exist out of itself, they do not have to be constructed, but can simply be used. People have to be tricked into using the external elements. Duality works on a large scale and a small scale. If one manipulates the inner of the people into a strong dual mindset, the duality between the necromancer and the controlled units also strengthens. So more power. More power means that the moral barrier in the controlled group is broken down and they become open to totalitarian orders. In the esoteric spiritual world, everything is interconnected, and we find there the idea of universal human rights. There, the concepts of equality apply. In the exoteric materialistic world, things are physically separated from each other. There, the concepts of freedom and inequality apply. The cult is told that esoteric science is wrong and exoteric science is right. At the same time, they are told that in morality, the idea of freedom and egoism is wrong, and equality and altruism is right. Thus, the cult begins to indulge in ideas that serve the element on the outer left. Instead of a mental understanding of equality, equality is transferred to the material. The anti-cult will notice this. Conspiracy theories will emerge that seek to educate about mass control and the occult. But that's not a problem for the necromancer. From his point of view, people can be educated about it. It's even helpful to radicalize them. The anti-cult is enlightened to the fact that the idea of materialistic equality is false. Through the dual classifications of black and white, the opposite is quickly perceived as right. So it becomes an esoteric worldview with right-wing morality of freedom and inequality. This divides the population into left-wing exoterics and right-wing esoterics. The true nature of reality would be a unity of left-wing esoterics and right-wing exoterics. The anti-cult is perfect to build an enemy image for the cult. They are each other's archetype of ultimate evil. It is the perceived devil. A dialectic of problem-reaction-solution leads a population to totalitarianism. The best way is to scare the population. One creates problems so that the cult and anti-cult accept totalitarian solutions. The cult is the one that reacts to the general spread of fear. The anti-cult feels increasingly helpless in the face of cult behavior in the population and hopes that someone will come and clean up the mess. The anti-cult sees itself as a defender against totalitarianism, but if they become radicalized, they are also willing to give up individual freedoms in the fight against the cult. The reactionary anti-cult can then be used again for the totalitarian dialectic. The dangers of an emerging reactionism that is morally opposed makes the cult accept more civilians. They can be set against each other so strongly that they end up not even caring about the totalitarian system that is being built along the way, but only focus on fighting each other. It is just a matter of the cults building a mental wall to never find a liberal dialectic. Thesis plus antithesis equals synthesis only works if people can get rid of the idea that thesis and antithesis are enemies. The cult must believe that the antithesis is always good. The anti-cult must believe that the thesis is always good. Even if they are aware of all the problems, there will never be a solution as long as a dual cut in the middle is maintained. Then there is always only a dual black versus white, and both cults only compare their pro-life element with the anti-life element of the other side. The cult is manipulated to strive for a global centralization of power in order to achieve a state in which every human being has equal positive legal rights. Nations and native cultures stand in the way of this. These are then perceived as an ideology that has no value or should even be overcome. The anti-cult reacts provoked to the artificial interventions in its own culture, and the desire to restore old conditions arises more and more. The cult sees itself in a heroic battle between cosmopolitanism and xenophobia. The anti-cult sees itself in a heroic battle between the destroyers of the homeland culture and the protectors of the promised land. Crimes against people lie in the outer edges, and in order to avoid them, both perspectives should always be taken into account. However, this also means that if a necromancer can get the cult and anti-cult to each see and understand only one axis of perception, they will slowly move away from avoiding potential genocides. The more the cults split, the higher the probability of potential genocides. Basically, everything is suitable for political division. Man against woman, introverts against extroverts, collectivists against individualists, egoists against altruists, foreigners against natives, or public law against private law. Also here, the goal of the necromancer is to serve the external elements. Since the system is then both, he can tell the cult that the problem is private law and that more power should be given to the monopoly on violence. The anti-cult is told that the problem is public law and that the state and all its institutions should be overthrown. The concepts of mental and biological gender are also very important. The necromancer has no problem with esoteric knowledge being talked as long it is only half true. No one is talked a true picture of metaphysics. The anti-cult learns about the connections between crowd control and esotericism, but these are held in a duel to rule versus to be ruled. The cult learns about the idea of fluid esoteric genders, but then mixes it with biology and sexuality. By mixing everything incorrectly, one creates great confusion on both sides. Both then serve an unnatural element in that it is considered wrong if the biological gender does not match the mental one. The outer right element tries to make man or woman serve the corresponding mental gender through cultural or physical pressure. The outer left element does not try to align the mind with the body, but the body with the mind. For example, through artificial hormones and sexual mutilation. It is a necessity for the necromancer that both sides do not understand the true mental gender so that they can be manipulated into a binary perception of reality. Once the masses become aware of the nature of reality and mental science, it is game over for the necromancer. Therefore, it is of extreme importance to him that the Philosopher's Stone is never understood as a rational formula for philosophical analysis. For this purpose, alchemy in general should be mystified as something evil or stupid. The anti-cult should best associate alchemy and its symbols directly with Satanism. He spreads rumors that he literally interacts with evil supernatural demons. It's all a hoax, of course. All these rituals only serve to build up a false image to distract from rational knowledge. It's like a magician show. If people believe that he really interacts with the supernatural, they become afraid of him, or they get scared of the symbols themselves. It is difficult to recognize the symbols as neutral archetypes when there's too much negative emotions attached to them. The cult, which is manipulated into anti-authoritarian obedience to orders, should only see nonsense in esotericism so that it is not confronted with mass control or liberal solutions. This can easily be achieved by mixing good education about exoteric sciences, such as chemistry, with the information that the search for the Philosopher's Stone is a physical task and that it would only be embarrassing to deal with it. That it would be like boiling urine and hoping for gold at the end. The cult must therefore be indoctrinated to restrict itself purely to materialistic science, and the cult members themselves will ensure that everyone who extends their research too far into esoteric science will lose their reputation. After all, the necromancer is only ever interested in one thing: the power to make others run into their own death. To bring innocent and peaceful people to the point where they slaughter each other. When the dual split has progressed to the point where the cult is about to establish a totalitarian globally monopoly on violence, the anti-cult is easily tempted to fight it with reactionary fascist totalitarianism. The anti-cult then rejects any form of equality and sees itself in the right to do anything to clear the world of the cult and its effects. Then the worst crimes happen. Mass murders, public executions, bloody street battles, and a world war in which everything collapses. Well, or people come to their senses and recognize the irrational game of manipulation. The binary ideas in the left-hand path simply have nothing in common with the nature of reality. It is nothing more than a mental disorder. Both the necromancer and the controlled population have a false perception of reality with which they harm themselves and others, like a drunk bus driver heading for a very painful accident. Then it doesn't matter if the bus driver enjoyed driving people where he steered them. Sooner or later, nature always punishes such stupidity with consequences.